So one of the main things you see in Agatha Christie books is a certain amount of sexism, yes, but racism against people from other countries. So this is present throughout these books. This would be, imperialistic sentiments, which would be a little more of, this is how people would have spoken, and also characters which wouldn't really appear. There's also, of course, people say that, there's homophobic tendencies, but that's more of a simple sort of society problem. So we won't be addressing that in this episode, seeing as that's more of a society problem, not the author's personal choice. So one of the main things we do see in the books is that, certain ethnicities are kind of portrayed as the bad guy. So foreigners are often portrayed as non-main characters, and non-English persons are often portrayed as either, when they do feature, they're either kind of side characters not featured in the story, and when they are featured in the story full-on as main characters, they tend to be bad people. Whether this is full-on bad, in some of the books, or in books such as Taken at the Flood, in which they may not be the main antagonist, they may not be the murderer, who's committed the crime, but they're the person who's committed other crimes or committed bad deeds. And I think the main issue here is that you look at this and you see there's a small problem. And the problem is, this isn't society saying, this person is like this person should be ignored, this person, it's literally someone getting a specific character, an individual, and placing them in this situation. And you think, well, that's fine, that's one out of numerous. But hold on a second, when you analyse it and you look at the others, and in each period of time you see this. And of course we could just say that, writers around this time are often in Britain quite racist, but I think our main issue here is, of course, we have to look at Agatha Christie. She's directly, making comments and all these things, and while you could say, these are the characters, these are the characters, this is the time period, I think it's a little bit important not to let your things, so if you are racist and you're a writer, probably best not to let that racism creep into your work. And by that I do not mean the characters can't be racist, that's the character. And also can technically saying, well, the character's meant to be racist, the reader's meant to dislike the character, but that's not the issue. The issue is when the writer actually writes the physical characteristics, whether they're describing the character, whether they're just saying what they've done, having their character, having their personality, or even just not mentioning some characters, the thing, for example, as I said, we wouldn't really be mentioning the fact that a lot of writers at this time wouldn't really mention homophobic relationships, because that is the point that not only is this probably, the law was only recently passed enough in England that you are allowed to teach children and, talk about it in the public domain about these relationships, but also because society at this time wouldn't have been very safe, seeing as it was illegal, and characters are obviously not going to admit this. It wouldn't be rational. Of course, people do say that the idea of a spinster, the two elderly women living together, that people do say that is in fact hinting at a lesbian relationship, but of course that's a talk for another day. The main point here that we're looking at is, you've got characters with darker skin. They're portrayed as kind of either side characters or they're portrayed as in quite a racist manner. And I think the problem is people are simply saying, oh, well, that's the time. But see, you can't really say that's the time. You can't say, oh, all the characters are racist and they aren't necessarily portrayed as bad people to the reader. That's not the issue. The issue is these are literal things, not that any character has said, not anyone, nobody has pointed this out. Everyone in that scenario could, at the back of their mind, be not racist in any shape or form, because the author is the only person who said in the narrative form, and the narrator is in some occurrences, yes, a character, but in this occurrence, it's describing the person, and it's describing the person when the narrative form shifts from a character into just a plain narrative style, which would be, away from what that character themselves can physically see. In a murder mystery, of course, that is important, because, we do see that if you're in a murder mystery and you know about an occurrence when a blackmailer is blackmailing the murderer, well then it wouldn't be rational. You have to change your narrative style. And I understand that, but the problem is that you are in the position whereby are you really in the position whereby you can say that you're not being racist by describing people who have darker skin. You can't really claim that you're not racist. And then you've got different kind of countries. People, if you examine English literature, even modern day English literature, some of it, not all of it, but some of it is kind of anti against sort of other kind of countries as well. Not just people who have darker skin, not just people, not just people of their female gender, not just people from different backgrounds, but mainly the main thing I would say is, of course, the different country narrative. And this, as I've said, this is what you see in these books. The people from different countries are essentially, they are portrayed as, shifty, bad, all of these things, and I think that is an issue. And of course, you could technically brand all of that under the idea of racism, because of course, technically there is no such thing as another human race. So basically, we've begun to say that this is racist, and I think when people argue, of course, about all of this, if someone listens to this podcast and says below in the comments, besides, this is really boring, I understand that, and I'll try to stop that. But if you say, oh, well, that's not racism, you are actually kind of right, but also kind of wrong, because racism is not a physical thing. It's not a thing to do with genetics, because there is no actual genetical other human race. There's only one human race. So, technically, racism does not exist. But then you say, well, racism is an invention of humans. You could say that there's a secondary sort of racism, which is the invention of humans, and this is when you could say that you could ban this ordinary sort of racism as perceived by everyone, along with kind of, racism. You could say, racism is also for religion, racism is also for countries, racism is also for backgrounds. So I would ban this in as racist, and the point is that you have to look at this, and this is I hope to do another episode in which I dive into this in greater detail, but guys, and I